I want to be honest with you guys, most entertainment news, and in fact most news in general, I cannot be bothered to follow. It's depressing, a lot of it's dull, it makes me feel sad, and just brings my day down. But sometimes there are things that catch my eye that I want to bring to your attention, even if they are a little depressing and bring your day down a little bit, because I think it's important to be informed on. And one of those things is digital rights management. No, before you fall asleep, what this really means is just if you have something digital, a lot of times there are clauses, statements in the agreement that we pretty much all habitually just click I agree to when we buy something, which say this. Pretty much at any time, for any reason, we can revoke your license to thing X that you purchased at this time, blah, blah, blah. Most of these companies operate under the good faith of not doing that, just because it would be a shitstorm for them, but they can do it. And over the weekend, there was a pretty big issue, I would say, with Ubisoft, Assassin's Creed creator, Splinter Cell creator. We're not going to let them forget about Splinter Cell, that does exist. I want to make some videos on that eventually. They make a lot of missteps, misfires, and mistakes. And that happened with this email that went out, where they were talking about closing Ubisoft accounts due to inactivity. Someone's going to say, well, Jay, later on, it was clarified by their support team that they don't actually delete accounts that have games connected to them. So this is a non-issue, right, Jay? It doesn't matter. Here's the problem. Everybody's focusing on this. This email went out. It said, we noticed that you have not been using your Ubisoft account associated with whatever. We've temporarily suspended the inactive account and will be closing it permanently within 30 days in accordance of our terms of use. If you wish to keep your Ubisoft account, you can cancel it by clicking this button, blah, 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 and doing this. They did say that they can, Ubisoft support actually chimed in on Twitter and said, we wanted to chime in and say you can avoid the account closure by logging into your account within 30 days since receiving the email and selecting the cancel account closure link. And here's the problem. Later on, they clarified, oh, well, here's the thing. We're not closing active accounts, and we don't close accounts with games, attached to them. That's what they said later on. So everyone's focusing on that. Everyone's focusing on the fact that they said they don't do that. You know what they didn't say? That they can't do that. That it's not within their ability to do that, because it is. This is something weird I've noticed that nobody is focusing on for some reason. Nobody's actually talking about this element of it. What they're saying is, oh no, they are doing that, or oh no, they're not doing that, so it's not a problem. It's neither of those things. According to them, they're not doing it. I've seen no evidence that they have closed accounts with games on them yet. But the people who are saying, well, they're not doing it, so it's not a problem, you do get that they can, right? The problem with digital rights management is this. There are some games that if you don't actually have, I would say, a connection to their service, those games just don't function. And that's kind of what happened with Ubisoft, because on PC, if you don't actually have their Ubisoft account, they did clarify that if you decided to close your Ubisoft account, you will not be able to play the games even if they have been bought in Steam. And again, the language here is very careful too, because they also say you will not be able to play our games, even if they have been bought in Steam. Well, Jay, that's how digital works. That's how physical works too. That disc of Batman Arkham Origins you have sitting in front of you, you don't actually own the game. You just own a license to play the game that's on the disc. Yeah, but here's the problem. We live in, the Second Amendment nation. What are you going to do? Come into my house and take it? Doubtful. Not a very smart move, especially with how jumpy the police are these days and how jumpy everybody else is with anyone around their house. Not a smart move, right? You're not going to come in and take that license from the disc. You're also not going to have a company show up at your house and take the disc with the license on it, as people say. The disc has files on it. And yes, you do not own the intellectual property on those files, but you own the disc, you own the physical item, and it has those things on it. So unless somebody's going to go over your house with a industrial magnet the size of, a small planet, I don't really know what they're going to be doing to your games. I see so many people say, what if you lose your game? And I'm like, what, do you juggle these things? What are you doing? Are you practicing juggling with rare games above Pennywise's sewers? Like, what's happening with these games that you're losing them? And if you're letting your friends borrow them and they're losing them, get better friends. Stop letting your friends borrow stuff. Just don't do it. Only let trustworthy friends borrow stuff. You got to be careful who you give your stuff to. But these companies feel the same way. You got to be careful who you give your stuff to. To them, it's their games, not yours. So right now on console, luckily, the way the DRM works is safer. The way the DRM works right now is if you don't have access to the Ubisoft Connect, Ubiplay, you play, we play, you play with yourself, you go play with me and play with yourself, whatever they're going to call it these days, as service, you actually just don't have access to things like your microtransactions that you purchased and things like that. On console, it's okay for now. But on PC, the system is an almost always online thing, where if you don't have Ubisoft Connect and you don't have your account with them, you can't play those games. If you have games on it, and let's say you shut down your account or they shut down your account, those don't work. But you know what works? A disc. But you know what sucks? The Ubisoft games on PC are pretty much all like this. PC games have gone away from disc years ago, basically almost a decade ago at this point, maybe even more, at the point where Steam was becoming really popular, and people were moving to digital. The problem is that more and more of these companies are kind of showing their hand that they can, if they want to, take away your access to these things at any time. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that it won't. And that's what's funny to me about these arguments is I see all these people saying, well, it did happen. I haven't seen evidence of it happening yet. I've seen all these people saying, well, it didn't happen yet. There's not evidence of it yet, so it's not a concern. Really? It's not a concern to you that some, person at a company could say, hey, this guy purchased $500 of our games. I don't really like him anymore. He said this thing online that was problematic, or, we got a Photoshop screenshot of chat where someone said he said or did this thing, or, oh, you know what? Maybe it was just a mistake. Maybe we closed the wrong account on accident and all those games go bye-bye. Whoopsie doopsie. That kind of stuff can happen. And it's very frustrating to me that so many people think that they can't actually have that happen to them just because it hasn't happened to them. Now, at the end of the day, this isn't like a big boogeyman, like, oh, you should live in fear because your digital games might be taken. I've seen a lot of people running with it that way in terms of like, oh, your days are numbered. You will never be able to own anything again. And what sucks is that it does seem like the future is going that way for media in a lot of ways. They want you to rent. They want you to buy digital. They want you to stream. They don't want you to actually buy physical. They don't want you to own anything. But that doesn't mean you still can't. Something I've been doing for a very long time is kind of, I wouldn't say stockpiling, but building up a library of some of my favorite games that I want to be able to play in the future. I don't lose those games. I don't worry about house fires really because I have insurance. I also have the ability to take care of my stuff so I don't lose it. And at the end of the day, these things are just things and they are replaceable. But the difference is, if somebody stole my things, if somebody stole my stuff, one, it's a lot easier to convict them, but two, I can actually replace those things. Those are physical objects. I'm getting another physical object to replace the first one. And that physical object has a lot of preservation potential to it. Blu-rays, there's been a lot of speculation on how long these things will last. Here's the great thing about digital. Digital matters because it's really good for preservation. Digital has created this, I would say, ecosystem online of emulation. It's created this ecosystem online of file sharing and being able to save files on hard drives. A hard drive can fail, but you can move the file to something else and it lives on. I think the great thing about digital is preservation as well going forward. The problem is when you have companies able to flip the switch so that digital files don't work anymore, so that you can't access them, so that they are meaningless and just kind of sitting there on your hard drive doing nothing. It's just mind-blowing to me nobody thinks about that. But one of the great things about how physical and digital can work together for the future is this. Physical discs can be burned to, even Blu-rays. Did you know that? I'm sure you did, obviously, because there's a way that they made the game, right? There's a way that when you play a PS3 game on a Blu-ray disc, somebody put it on there. The great thing about digital and physical is the way that they work together is that these things can be stored online, yes. They can also be stored locally on your hard drives or solid state drives or whatever, and they can be still moved to disks for the future. The great thing about that disk copy is that it's sitting there somewhere safe. It still exists. And the negative about digital is the hubris around it as well. The idea that none of these companies ever will step over those lines or on those toes. The idea that basically all knowledge and all good things are already preserved on the internet. It's not true. They still find books that are not digitized now, that are not available. You know, something I was looking at for me, because I do a lot of research for interviews with video game creators and movie creators and things like that, because I think it's important for me to understand the minds of some of these people that I talk about. And something I've found is that there's tons of interviews with, you know, great creators, even people like Hideo Kojima, that are not digitized. They're not online. They're sitting in some obscure magazine that hasn't been printed in 10 years. That's a real thing. There's a lot of stuff that is not preserved online, and the great thing about hard copies, whether it's a book or a disc or any of this stuff, is that it's another way to preserve those things. It's odd to me how vehemently against the existence of digital some people are. You as a consumer have no real reason to advocate so heavily for that. What you should be advocating for is consumer options. What you should be advocating for is consumer protections. Things that prevent companies from letting you buy a license and then just immediately revoke it and be like, nah, those files are worthless. If they do that, at the very least, they should be forced legally to give your money back. At the very least. I mean, I think at that point you should be recompensed as well for, what would you say, inconvenience. But you don't get anything. And it's crazy too, because there are laws being passed. There are a lot of different things. You know, the whole international issue with Steam returns, where it kind of went to court, and I don't even remember what country it was basically like, no, Steam has to offer returns. Like, you can't be doing business in our country without doing that because that's part of consumer protection. These kind of things need to be taken more seriously and actually looked into. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that it can't. It's just something that's very unfortunate because this stuff is making its way as well into console games very slowly. We are seeing consoles be developed without disk drives, and we are seeing people, I would say personally, even though it's how, you know, I'm very hesitant to say spending their money stupidly, because I spend my money on things people would say is stupid. I would say misguidedly eating it up. You know, thinking, well, the company will have my best interest at heart. Anytime you have to put your faith in a company having your best interests at heart, and you just have to hope and pray that they will, you know, abide by good faith, you're at a problem. Whenever you don't have some kind of check and balance or something that prevents them from doing something bad to you, almost every time they will. You know, these guys, these people that run these huge corporations, they're the same type who say things like, water is not a basic human right. You know, these people, like the executives at the top of these companies, just in general, most of these huge companies, how do you think they got there? Yeah, sure, there's some of them that are good people that worked really damn hard and just clawed their way to the top. A lot of them are ruthless. A lot of them do not have much empathy and do not care about you. You are a number to them. It works in the food industry and especially works in the game industry. And when you see all these issues with like a tribe in Africa being deprived of water because of some massive food corporation being insane and lacking any empathy, and then you look over at games and you expect them in something that's like moderately unimportant compared to these big issues where there's already sociopathy just running rampant. You can't look at something like the entertainment industry and be like, no, I'm sure those guys are good. I'm sure they're good people. I'm sure they'll do good. It's just not how it works. A lot of these companies need to be held accountable in some way. And honestly, there's not a great way to do it other than being careful who you spend your money on and being careful what types of things you're buying and actually reading the fine print on what they can do with those things. The great thing about something like my PS5 is that yes, there is a lot of functionality tied to the internet. However, most games have a 1.0 build on the disc that has to be completable. Now, there's a lot of games you want to do your research on and not buy early, and there's a lot of games that are very boring in an unpatched state. That is unfortunately where gaming has gone. However, there are tons of games, especially HD remasters and collections, that run perfectly fine right out of the box with no update. It's not something you're going to get with digital. It's not something you're going to get with DRM and these issues of the future, and unfortunately, people just don't want to care. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. I truly believe, like I said 100 times, just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it can't. They proved that it can happen. That is what should be concerning to people. But I'm sure people will excuse it away and find a reason why it doesn't matter and it's just alarmist and this is the future and blah, blah, blah. It's crazy to me how far some of these companies have managed to get their arms up certain consumers that they're like working their mouth like a sock puppet. Like, you know, like they're not even saying their own words. They're just echoing the company line. And it's unfortunate because it's not actually benefiting them in the long run. It's like sheep to a slaughter. You're walking to your own demise on this stuff. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a fantastic day. And as always, everyone, stay shui.